Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Everything about this podcast is about getting real about things that really influence not only how we get to where we want to be in terms of our physical goals, our life goals, our transformation, but also getting real about what gets in our way. And I feel like this is such a huge topic. And I have Gab Fundaro on the podcast with me, and we had two podcasts quite a while ago speaking about a completely different topic around gut health. But at the same time, it's not so completely different because what we're talking about today impacts so much of your physiology, including your gut health. It can lead to your belly being super bloated and feeling gross and your digestion being amok because body image, your relationship with food, all of that is a stressor on your body. This topic is so important because it impacts your results. It impacts how you experience living in your body, how you experience relationships with others, and more. So, with that, here's Gab Fundaro, and I'm going to let her introduce just why body image is such an important topic, including self criticism and how this impacts everything else downstream.
Well, thank you for having me. And that was a fantastic introduction that really highlights the importance of everything we're talking about today. And it is so important because body image being the way that we think and feel about our appearance is so interrelated with the way that we think and feel about ourselves as people. And that in turn influences the way that we interact with food and movement, if we want to think about just like the physical fitness realm. But I think even more importantly, how we interact with the people in our lives, how we navigate social situations, professional situations, romantic situations. When people think about being confident, they often are thinking, oh, that a part of that means, feeling like I like the way that I look. And so if I like the way that I look, then I'm going to like myself more and feel better in all areas of life and feel more capable. And that's actually not the case. And so when people are sort of misled to believe that changing their appearance is going to change their whole life, they can become very fixated. They can become really preoccupied with the way that they look. And they can be very disappointed about the reality, which is that, yes, the way that we look influences to some extent the way that we're treated. We have to acknowledge that. But changing our appearance is not going to fix everything else.
I also feel like if you think it's all about the way that you look and changing your appearance, what are you measuring that against? Because as soon as you start down that route, you don't see yourself as you are. And I think that actually becomes the issue in itself because it just becomes a never ending pursuit where you're chasing a forever moving horizon. And then this leads to more self criticism because you get more hard on yourself. You probably put in more rigid rules and then you're not able to stick to it. And then it brings in more self criticism. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about how that cycle tends to aggravate the whole situation.
Absolutely. When you think about it, if we're trying to change our appearance in order to change other things like our relationships, our confidence at work, if we're trying to use our appearance as a way to modify anything or everything in our lives, and it's not going to happen, then we logically assume, we think, well, I have to look better then. I just didn't change my appearance enough. I just don't look good enough. And so we keep raising the bar higher and higher because our physique change never fully translates into this overall transformation that we were hoping for. And even if it does, even if we change our physique and then a lot of great things happen in our lives, now we have attached causation to that physique change. And we think that everything is at stake if we lose that physique. If my appearance changes, then I'm going to lose everything that I've worked so hard for. And so in either case, whether we get, the some or all or none of the results that we hoped for, the issue is that we have attached that to our appearance, which is inevitably going to change, which can never be perfect because perfect is subjective, which is always going to then be our focus and our sort of proxy for a sense of control in our lives. But since we're not actually getting to the root of the problem, we're constantly going to feel like we're on this treadmill or this hamster wheel and never getting really that much closer to our overall goal of really feeling safe, really feeling secure in ourselves. That's not something that we can get from an external change.
And I feel like people would just like turn off when they see people trying to preach positive body image and working on your body image and parking things aside to improve your body image, because they feel like they're two different things, where they can't have vanity goals. If they improve their body image, it means accepting themselves as they are. But what they don't realize is that these two things meld together. And something that I'm trying to do more and more in everything that I preach is trying to meld together the two worlds, because it's almost like on one extreme there's like the anti-diet culture, which I hate to oblivion, because you're allowed to change your body. It's just people need to come at it from this positive relationship, because otherwise you're never going to be happy with it. And the more that you chase these body goals, the harder you're going to get on yourself, the more you're going to dislike your body, because it's the one thing that's in focus, and you're focusing on everything you want to change, everything you don't like. So then that becomes more and more of the thing that you're focusing on. So that is one thing that usually gets in the way. I'm sure that you can think of many more as well, and I want you to kind of highlight those. But there is something that you mentioned in the podcast that I heard you talk about this on iron culture. And it was, did you really improve your body image if you changed your body and et cetera, or is the fact that you're happy with everything just constituent on the fact that you changed your body? So I want you to talk a little bit more about what else gets in the way, and then that particular aspect here.
Yeah. I said, if you only like your body when it looks a certain way, you haven't actually improved your body image. You've just made your body less triggering. So for the time being, you're just not having these negative body image thoughts because nothing is bringing them up, because you like the way that you look right now. And you can have a positive body image and also like the way that you look. It's not a sign of negative body image if you like your appearance. Where it becomes negative, where it becomes harmful, is when you become very attached to your appearance. If your appearance changes, that affects your mood and affects the way that you feel about yourself as a person, rather than just being able to accept how you appear in that moment without letting it rule the way that you are interacting with the rest of your life. So, for example, if a person, gets a haircut or they get a new tattoo, they can like the look of that. They can say, "Oh, I like this new haircut. Oh, I really like this tattoo." That doesn't necessarily mean that they have improved their overall body image. It just means they like their appearance in that moment. And in most cases, when we're talking about things like that, like body modification, hair dye or a piercing or a tattoo, we don't necessarily attach so much of our quality, our value as a person, to those little changes. But when a person is looking at their whole body and saying the way that my body looks represents who I am as a person, then that can be a little bit more risky. If we're, even if we're focusing on the process, if we're saying like, "Oh, I'm working really hard on sticking to my nutrition and my training plan," if we assign a lot of value to those things and say, that means that I'm a good person, that means that I'm making good decisions and I'm really hardworking and dedicated, then if something happens in life, we lose our job, we lose a loved one, have a kid, and it's hard for us to continue those behaviors and it's hard for us to maintain that physique. If we have attached a lot of our self-worth to our appearance and even to those behaviors, and we can no longer live that way, Then that's where the self-criticism comes in that you pointed out, where it's like, oh, now I'm lazy. I can't get my shit together. You know, I used to be so determined and so hardworking. What happened? Instead of accepting the reality of the moment, which is my circumstances have changed and that makes my previous lifestyle unrealistic, we tend to spiral into this realm of self-criticism and shame and guilt when we haven't done anything wrong. So that's what I mean when I say, you know, just because you've changed your appearance doesn't necessarily mean you've changed your body image, because if it's contingent on you looking a certain way, then that is conditional. It's not a true self-acceptance, because you wouldn't be able to accept yourself. You would be self-critical. You would be sometimes disgusted if you were to gain 20, 25 pounds. Like that is a horrible thought for a lot of people, because it's not just that, oh, the fact of the matter is I've gained excess body fat. It means something then about who they are as a person. And of course, we live in a society where people make assumptions about others based on their appearance, which is unfortunate. And it makes it all the more challenging to move away from that fixation on appearance and the fixation on you know, maintaining a specific diet and exercise regimen, because there is a legitimate modification in the way that we're treated and perceived. So that's another thing that can be really hard for people to face and to cope with. Because, you know, they felt safer when they were smaller, and now they are having to deal with changes in the way that they're perceived. So I would say that, like, at the root of both of those is really, like, people don't feel a sense of safety and security in themselves. And so the thought of losing their physique is a threat on a deep level.
I love that, because you did mention in there a few times self-talk and inner narratives, and I feel like that is the crux of body image, and there are so many different things that can trigger this. And one thing in particular obviously will be the scales, but the other is also our clothes. Like, we can feel really okay in our bodies until we wear something, and then that's triggering, or until the seasons change, because I know that summer is a huge part, not just because of the clothes you wear, but because when it's hot, our bodies feel bigger, which is expected because your body is trying to cool itself. So it's holding a lot more fluid to try to cool itself, because that's how it cools itself. And then obviously sometimes after training sessions as well, if you had a hard training session and you're holding a lot more water from the soreness or the inflammation, or if your body's really sore, or if your life in itself, like there are things outside of your life that are out. This is a big one. This will be a huge one for you to talk about actually as well. But when you don't do things the way that you intended to do them, or when you're veering off your quote unquote best plan, you feel more critical about your body. When things are happening outside of your control, you try to control your body. I don't know where exactly this comes from, so maybe you can talk about that as well. But the second part is, you mentioned, that's the word, contingent. But if it's only contingent on the fact that you've now changed your body, you're probably still doing a lot of particular habits, et cetera, to make sure that you maintain it that way without realizing that that's what's causing the positive body image. But then our bodies change over time. Our lifestyles change over time. If you get pregnant, if perimenopause, what's going to happen then? And if you then can't keep up that lifestyle, what's going to happen then? So yeah, I think that control element will be something really powerful to talk about, and the whole what role self-talk and inner narratives play within this.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a great point. I mean, when we think about the inevitable life changes that we're going to face, especially as women, you know, going into perimenopause and menopause, we want to be well prepared to deal with those changes. We don't want those changes to be so completely emotionally overwhelming that we feel incapable of enjoying the rest of our lives. And so that's why this work is so important. It's important to deprogram a lot of the ideas that have been marketed to us, especially within the fitness industry, that make us feel as though we are not allowed to exist in a larger body than our smallest body, that we lose value if we get bigger or we get older, that we sort of like owe it to other people to engage in a specific type of lifestyle. I mean, really, the fact is you don't owe anyone anything. Like, you don't have to look a certain way. If you gain fat, if you are not objectively attractive, like, I think it's important that we shift the narrative from, oh, like, everyone's beautiful, to like, you don't have to be beautiful. That's okay. Like, you don't have to be what society is telling you that you need to be. And I think when we can shift that perspective, when we liberate ourselves from that, then it becomes easier to shift our internal narrative to say, so what if I have cellulite? So what if I gained 10 vanity pounds? My blood work is still healthy. I still, train regularly, or I move in ways that are enjoyable. And, I eat in ways that are aligned with my values. And maybe my value is, I value, physical health. And so we can shift the underlying motives for why we're doing these things. And it becomes then less about being obligated to do it or being controlled by external factors, and shifting more to, I have agency in my life. And when we do that, we also can catch those old thoughts about, like, where we're comparing ourselves to someone who's younger or leaner, where we are worrying about our gray hair, where we are looking in the mirror and looking at the ways that we're getting like more saggy or more wrinkles. And we can just notice, like, hey, I wasn't born with that internal dialogue. When I was 3-4 years old, I didn't judge my body. My body just was. I didn't really think about it that much. I was programmed to judge my body, and I was programmed to think about it in this specific way within my culture or subculture. So when we can identify those thoughts as not being thoughts that we own, that we want to own, or that we want to believe, it's not that the thoughts don't come up. We still will have triggering moments. We still will, if we go to try on a bathing suit in a changing room mirror. But it's not about completely eliminating those thoughts. It's about how we respond to them, and responding to them with understanding and acceptance and self-compassion, so that they can visit us for a minute, and then they essentially just move on. And we move on as well. We say, well, maybe I don't get this bathing suit because it's not comfortable. But, if I have rolls or something, well, if the bathing suit's comfortable, then I'm going to get it anyway. I don't care that I have rolls when I sit down. That doesn't matter. If someone's going to judge me for that, that's not a person that I need to have in my life. So it really, I think, is about how we respond to our inner dialogue. But in order to change that, we really do need to get to the root, like that initial story that we decided to believe when we were teenagers, about how we're supposed to look, and decide that's not how I want to be programmed anymore.
I like that you mentioned the word programming, because we are pretty much like computers in that sense. Like, the programming is there. Sometimes we don't even change our hardware. We just keep trying to update the software. But if you think about, like, oh my goodness, my phone 2 years ago, actually, no, a year and a half ago, my phone completely just died on me. And it was a phone that I had for about 4 years. It was my work phone. So I didn't really care about changing it. I just changed my personal phone. And it was like the battery would only last about 4 hours, and then I would have to charge it again. So there was that issue. But it kept saying, update the systems, but it was still really, really faulty as a phone. It's like, I could try to update the systems all I can, but the phone was the most glitchy thing in the world until it just completely died, and I couldn't even charge it, and I lost everything. And this is pretty much the same with us. It's like, you can keep trying to update the stuff that you see on the screen, but without updating the hardware, you're going to keep falling back to those basics. It's kind of like that whole contingency thing. It's like, it's contingent on this. until something happens, and then you fall back to default settings, and then it's a complete catastrophe and the phone just stops working. And so I just wanted to use that as like an analogy there. But you mentioned judgment from others. And one thing that there's a few questions. There's how do you build this sense of safety within yourself? And I feel like the biggest part is we feel like we do owe these explanations to people. But why? Why do we feel like we owe explanations to people? Why do we feel like we owe people things? Why do we put so much pressure on ourselves? There's that. And then you mentioned programming from the past. Thoughts aren't facts, and thoughts aren't just going to stop. They're going to keep influencing our feelings, but we get better at cross-examining them. I think this comes back to the question of how do we build this sense of safety within ourselves, and how do we manage our relationship to other people in that sense? And how do we liberate ourselves from the shit of the 60s, 70s, 80s, actually even 90s, because it wasn't until like 2000s or even the 2010s, I think it was the 2010s, unless I'm just only realizing that's when I started to make the shift. But it's like now you're seeing more people in the gym, more people are actually fueling themselves, wanting to build muscle. But like before 2010, it wasn't really the case. So yeah, I asked quite a lot, so I'll let you take that off, because I feel like this is the most important part, because everything we do, it's always in relation to others. And it's kind of weird. Like, even if you just think, that just blew something, even if you just think about people doing any type of goals, it's I feel a pressure to do XYZ. I don't have time to do these healthy habits because I have too much on my plate. It's too overwhelming. Even in workplaces, it's just like I feel so much pressure. Why do I put so much pressure on myself to do this? And then people don't actually give themselves the time they need to get to where they want to be. So then they do crash diets and they do fast fixes and they try to rush the process because they don't have enough time, or they just keep falling off from a really good plan because of the fact that they have so much going on, because we feel like we owe people all of these different things. Why is that?
Yes, that is a great question. I think that there are probably different explanations depending on your upbringing and your culture. Coming from the US and having done a lot of research and writing about really the history of diet culture and beauty standards, obviously the standards are different for men and women. There are specific gender roles to which we have been assigned, which I think are shifting a lot now in the past several years. But I mean, really, it's been since even before the 60s, 70s, it's been since the early 19 teens that the US has had a fixation on calories in versus calories out, and have labeled body fat as not just a physiological phenomenon, but as a sign of being a bad citizen. Like you're not putting in your civic duty. You are labeled as lazy. I mean, there are a lot of labels associated with weight bias, but like lazy, less intelligent, less capable. People assume that people in large bodies are less happy, that they can't find love, and that is from 100 years of programming around that was based in propaganda linked to food conservation during World War One. But those sentiments have stuck with us. And so now, instead of having a large body being viewed as a sign of wealth and prosperity and health, now it's just the opposite. So that applies to men too, but women also have the added layer of, being labeled as less valuable with age. And usually as we age, we tend to lose some muscle mass and gain some body fat. And so we have these layers of deficits. And so I think it kind of makes sense that, maybe there's some subconscious or just below the surface thoughts that we owe people, because if we don't do all of these extra things, we can't dare just exist. That's like not, that's against the rules. It is against the rules to just exist. It's against the rules to be doing nothing. It's against the rules to just rest and be leisurely doing nothing. It's against the rules to not want to exercise. It's against the rules to have excess body fat. All of these things are seen as a threat to the workforce, a threat to capitalism, a threat to the way things are supposed to be to maintain a specific hierarchy within society. So when people in general, but especially women in large bodies, when they say, actually, F all that, I don't want to exercise, a lot of us look at them and say, how dare you? I'm working so hard to fit into the system, and you're like a drain on resources. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. When in reality, it's not that one person who's at fault. It is, or who's, utilizing a lot of resources, especially when we're talking about healthcare. It's that we're trying to fit into a system that has not evolved with humanity since the early 1900s. We're trying to force people into a healthcare system that's dysfunctional, and one of the most effective ways to maintain the status quo is to make people afraid of change, is to make people afraid of doing something differently. So we are programmed to think that we're supposed to earn our keep, like, as people. And part of that is looking a certain way and eating a certain way and exercising and saying yes to people and never saying no. And the harder we work, the better we are. And I think it's just so unfortunate because we don't get that much time here, right? And I don't want to spend all of my time living on somebody else's terms. So I think as I have reached my middle age, I've really decided, F all that noise. Like, I like to train, but I don't train as much as I used to. And I eat a lot more fun food now. And I just decided to care a lot less, because if people are going to judge me, at the end of the day, I get to decide who is in my life. So that's my,
as soon as you just said that, as soon as you just said that last part, it's funny because I think I will put it up today. I wrote my ins and outs for 2025, and I didn't do it like I didn't make it too personal to start with. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to add in 2 extra slides. I'm going to write in what's actually in and out, and then add my take on what I need to focus on. And one of my last parts was that exact thing. It's just like, I don't owe anyone anything. I want to live life on my terms, because what I realized is that when I do things in a way that makes me feel at my best, makes me feel most excited about my life, that is when I show up better to others. Instead of, like, this even works with work in itself. It's just like, if work comes first and I'm neglecting myself, or if I have to work everything around work, but I'm neglecting what makes me excited about the work, then that quality work is going to go down. And that's the same with your body. If you think about your body, it's just like, if everything is about trying to fix your body, in a sense, it's almost like, well, you're going to keep feeling like shit because you're not focusing on the things that actually influence that. Like, most of the time it's because there's other things outside of us that aren't fulfilling us. So we try to fix our bodies instead. It's like, okay, so how can we add more joy to your life? How can we get you more excited about your life? What is it that you're lacking in your life? Is it that you're not addressing your marriage, as an example, or you're not addressing the fact that you hate where you work? Like, addressing these other things that make you feel alive, which is kind of now where I'm trying to target my messaging with my own coaching. Is I want people to just focus on getting strong and what makes them feel confident in the gym. Because when you focus on the things that are empowering, you come at it from a more positive place, and it's not something you can just quote unquote born yourself into or birth yourself into. It is really difficult, especially when the only way you know how to measure progress is the scales, is how you feel in your clothes. And I feel like a lot of the triggers are clothes related, especially if you have to wear tight blouses, tight sleeves, tight pants. I'll let you talk about that one next. But just because you're not focusing on those metrics does not mean you're letting your body go. It's that we are so confined to this small little, I guess, whole of the way that we define progress, the way that we define what's quote unquote good, that we don't allow ourselves to experience what could be great, what could be what actually has us feeling confident. And this is kind of where I was thinking on the confidence element, where confidence doesn't come from you continually chasing the I want to fix my body. It comes from how can I align X, Y, Z to make me feel more confident? Like, what does confidence actually look and feel like to me? Because trying to fix myself is only going to make me focus on where I currently am right now versus where I could be. And this is kind of where health focused habits can come into. Like, if you're focusing about what makes you feel good, then you're going to keep doing what makes you feel good. And all of a sudden, it's like everything kind of fade. Well, it doesn't really fade. It's just that because now you're starting to feel good, you're starting to feel more confident, then that is going to start being a driving force versus everything you don't like forcing you, pushing you, shoving you, and it feels very grit and grind. And when you're in that mindset, I feel like that's when people try to rush the process, or they get really impatient about how slow things are, and then they self-sabotage. Because like I introduced the podcast, it's not the fact that we don't know how to get to where we want to be, and it's not the fact that you haven't got results before or you haven't done the right thing before. Like, you technically could be doing the right things, you technically could have a really good coach, but it doesn't make you immune to sabotaging yourself. And this is really where I want to reach home. Like, this is all just coming to this peak where I want to give people tools and practical ways that they can stop this self-sabotage. Because if I just wanted to, because while you were talking, I was like, am I actually considering the fact that I changed my body? Because I did come from like a lot of body dysmorphia. So I was like thinking, is that why I accept my body now? Because I actually changed it. But then I was thinking, no, I was 5 kilos heavier before I did my very first ever fat loss phase, literally 4 years ago now. Like, I have not done a calorie deficit in 4 years, but I was thriving then. Like, I was energized, but I feel like that was contingent on the fact that I had life as a context, and I still have life as a context. I have things that bring passion to me, but more than anything, it's because I know that I am in control of my actions. And when I'm in control of my actions, I know that I can just influence whatever I want to influence, and I feel strong in that. I feel confident in that because I'm chasing things that make me feel good. I don't want to do what makes me feel like shit. And I feel like if people can get to that place where they trust themselves enough, that would be huge. But how else can we get people to move to this place with the tools that they need to stop the self-sabotage and improve their relationship with themselves and with their body image, so that it doesn't, because this is where the eating comes in as well. This is where the food comes in, because the self-sabotage usually exhibits itself in the way that they are around food, the way that they are around the habits that are going to get them to their goals. So it's like you think all of this is serving you, but it's actually sabotaging you.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of it, I think, comes down to the first step being us as coaches and health professionals to help people become aware of these cycles and aware of the root causes, the root beliefs, and the root narratives that lead them to like keep repeating history. And not just with food and movement, but also in their relationship with other people, their relationships with other people, the way that they show up at work and with their families. And quite often, the way that we feel about ourselves, you know, that translates into the way that we navigate the world and behave. So helping people to increase the awareness and to increase the awareness of what dieting has done for them thus far versus what they were hoping that it was going to do for them, and where they are versus where they want to be. That's the first step, really just creating the awareness, creating awareness of the disparities as well, of the distance between where we thought we were going to be and where we actually are. And then from there are skills, there are practical skills that we can help, that we can educate them about, that they can practice, like the practice of self-compassion, the practice of diffusion, enhancing things like the psychological flexibility. So it's our ability to sit with the difficult emotions and not believe them 100% as truths, but be able to, I like you said, cross-examine our thoughts and then still make values-based decisions. So, when we're at a place in our lives where we're like, wow, I don't feel satisfied like by my food or my job or my relationship, and I'm so frustrated, and my body feels like the one thing that I can control. That's a red flag that you have not been living in alignment with your values. You might not even know what they are. Like, you might not actually know yourself all that well, which then makes it very hard to know what your values are and to meet your own needs. So really, I think one of the most important questions I've ever been asked by my therapist was, well, who are you? But like in a way that doesn't involve other people. Who are you if no one else exists? Who are you? And it was very hard for me to answer that, because I'm like, well, everything that I exist, in a way that helps other people. The things that I would use to describe myself are in relation to other people. But to be able to identify, actually who I am at my core in a way that doesn't require me to perform for other people, getting in touch with that part of yourself and sort of getting to know yourself once again, that can help you then to feel more self-assured, more secure, because now you know who you are, what you need, what's important to you. And it's easier to make decisions that you actually feel good about. And then you get a greater sense of agency in your life. And you're no longer trying to use dieting and shrinking your body as a proxy for a sense of control. That used to be a thing for me. And I've seen that in a lot of clients where like life gets really hectic and they're like, oh, give me like a really strict macro plan. Everything's out of control. I don't feel good about where my life is. I don't feel good about myself. I'm going to go ahead and start counting macros. Now, for better or worse, that does not work for me anymore. If things are super shitty, I know it's because I have made decisions that were not actually in my best interest, and I have to take full responsibility for that and do the work of addressing that directly, which is much harder work. And it's harder for us as coaches as well to help folks with outcomes that may not even be goals that are easily set. When we're talking about like, I want to feel more confident, we can talk about how that looks, but sometimes people end up behaving in ways that they feel very proud of. They're applying these skills of self-regulation, and they like ask for a promotion, or they say no to someone, or they set a boundary. Those are not goals that we've necessarily set. There's still things to celebrate. There's still really important parts of this transformation, but it can be harder for us to quantify that, and to, we can't take a picture of that. But it still is a very important part of the process that we start to look at. I wouldn't even say progress necessarily, because it's not in one specific direction, but look at change, look at the signs of change in our lives. And if our lives are becoming more aligned with what we really want for ourselves.
It's not in one direction. I actually liked that part of what you said, because it's true. Like, it's never in one direction. It's always, this is why it's really important to know what it is that makes you feel good, like what is important to you, because you are able to shift whenever you want. And this is why having I would say having a coach versus quote unquote a trainer, or quote unquote just a nutritionist, is important, because a coach is so much more than that if the person actually embodies coaching, because they will guide you through these things, because a coach is a teammate. It's not a dictator. And when you allow yourself to be a little bit more fluid in it and realize that kind of putting these things first does not mean putting your vanity goals on hold, or vanity goals aren't important, because they are still important to you. It's just, where is it coming from? Is it coming from a values-led place, a health-focused place? Is it going to be contingent on just that, or is it going to be adding to your life? Are you doing things that add to your life versus something that becomes more of a drainage? And I feel like there are too many blind spots, which makes it really hard to build emotional awareness, which is why that whole behavioral goals thing is really important. But how can we start to build that confidence in where we're moving, but also how do we get better at cross-examining ourselves, I guess, but also getting in tune with our values-based decisions, because a lot of people don't really understand how it all melds together, and then how that impacts the very actions we need to do to get to a place where we're happy with, because it just ends up in a wheel spinning, self-sabotaging cycle.
For sure. Yeah. This is essentially, we're building a new relationship with ourselves. And in the same way that any new relationship requires time to build layers of trust, we have to give ourselves time to do that as well. Confidence, I think it's important also to talk about like what confidence actually is, because we say like feeling confident in your body, but confidence is your ability to achieve something. And like you can't feel capable of achieving your body. Your body is a thing. It's not a goal, if that makes sense. So when we talk about confidence, it's our sense that we are capable. And we often think like, well, if I look a certain way, I'm going to feel more capable. That could be true. And wouldn't it be great if you could feel more capable in the body that you have right now? Like if it wasn't contingent on the way that you look. And so we can focus on that and building real situational confidence. Like, where do you want to feel more confident? What do you want to feel more confident to do? To approach people to make friends, to ask for a promotion, to set boundaries? Then we say, okay, that's the thing that you want to feel safe doing. That's what we focus on. And we work on identifying the beliefs that are holding you back and finding ways that you can start to challenge those beliefs and give yourself evidence to the contrary. We can start at like square one and say, okay, you believe that you are out of control around food. Has there been a time in the past where you were around a food that tasted good and you ate a comfortable amount? Oh, even if there was one time in your life, that's evidence that you are not out of control around food. Or if I were to eat whatever I want, I would just eat junk food all day. Okay, well, what do you think you would want to eat? Cake and pizza and popsicles. How do you think you would feel after a week of that? Oh, actually, like crap. And I think people have experienced this too. They've been on vacation and they're like eating a bunch of like really tasty, rich food. And you're like, I really miss vegetables. Like we can only, I shouldn't there are exceptions to this, but in many cases, we are naturally inclined to avoid discomfort. Even if the discomfort is associated with something that's delicious, most of the time we're going to say, actually, it's not worth it. Like, I really like ice cream, but it's not worth it for me to eat a lot of ice cream because I'm lactose intolerant. So it's giving ourselves the opportunity to gather evidence to support new beliefs that are at least more neutral. They don't have to be positive. We're not trying to brainwash ourselves with toxic positivity because that's not going to work. That's going to backfire. But to just have a more neutral perspective that, hey, two things can be true at the same time. And I can be having negative body image thoughts and not act on them. Like those can exist. It doesn't mean that I have to do anything about it. I can just respond with self-compassion and move on about my day. Doesn't mean that I need to engage in a bunch of body checking. It doesn't mean that I need to go on a diet. It just means, I had some negative body image thoughts for a minute there. That felt really tough. And now I feel better because I gave myself time to process those emotions. So that's how we build that emotional resilience and the ability to self-regulate. We're just trying to come back to a more neutral place. We're not letting our momentary difficult emotions have lasting consequences. That's what we're trying to aim for. And then alongside that, obviously, when I mentioned talking about those underlying beliefs, replacing them with other beliefs, realizing like I was not born with this narrative. I decided to believe it. I can decide to believe something else. So I think those are the biggest stepping stones, and really like giving ourselves the opportunity for things not to go well, and to be able to sit with the difficult emotions that come with this process, knowing that just like with training, they get easier over time. Like your first few sessions in the gym, your first few runs feel the worst out of all of your sessions because they're the hardest. but things do get easier over time. And then you become more fluent in these skills, and you notice fewer triggering thoughts. You notice that you're not thinking about your body or your food so often. And instead, you're replacing that empty space with things that you enjoy more. You're being more intentional about where you're putting your energy. And suddenly it's like, oh, wow, my life is so much more full and complex. And I'm doing things that I was not allowing myself to do before. But now I'm not afraid of how my body is going to look when I'm doing them.
I actually love that part that you mentioned there with the lasting consequences, but also the fact that you're mentioning feeling good when you're doing particular things, including moving your body. Because we all know that well, actually, we don't all know this because you only know what you've experienced thus far, and you don't know how good you can feel until you feel good. And I feel like the biggest part of confidence comes from exactly what you mentioned, stacking proof. But you will never stack proof if you keep trying to aim for things that are too high out of reach instead of kind of starting where you're at, figuring out what it is that is holding you back, and starting small, building that up. Start stacking your wins, reflect on your wins, and
Yep.
celebrate that progress, because those little wins are stepping stones for bigger and better stepping stones. So that part
Yes.
there is really important that you mentioned. And the food part, one of my clients who's been with me for years, she went to one of her, exactly, you said not everyone will relate to it, and this is why the longer you've been in it to realize how good it freaking feels to feel good when you're doing health focused habits, which when people hear health focused habits, it's like, I don't give a shit about that. I just want to change my body. I don't care about getting strong. I just don't like how I look and I want to fix it. It's like they're kind of the same thing. It's just you're coming at it from a more positive angle that has a lot more sustenance to it and a lot more self-acceptance to it. And it's going to come with, guess what? No more self-sabotage. Guess what? You'll be able to endure it. Like, people think, I still have to get back to that point. People think that if you focus on strength or X or Y or Z, that they aren't going to get their initial goals they started out with, which usually people start out with, I want to change my physical body. But just because you have a lot of fat to lose, if you have a lot of fat to lose, which is how they're coming at it from, it doesn't, like, you're not going to endure the process, because in the end, like literally in the end, if you think 10 years from now, which isn't really the end, but it's like a lot can change in 10 years. Only for a lot of
Yeah.
people, it doesn't, because they keep repeating the same approach. Like, it doesn't matter who you hire or what you buy. If your mindset, this is why this is so important. If your mindset doesn't change, you're just going to keep getting the same outcomes because you're keeping yourself mentally stuck. But yeah, it's the self-sabotage will stop if you focus on it from this positive view. And anyway, my friend went, well, not my friend, my client went to her friend's house, and that friend didn't have any veggies. And her message to me was, holy shit, how do people live like this? I am craving veggies. My gut feels like it's a mess. And I can't wait to get home and just have a big freaking bowl of salad. Like, she was eating still pretty healthy because that's what makes her feel good. But there were no veggies. There was like no salad there. It's like, when you know how good you can feel, you'll keep doing things to feel that way. And guess what's the result of that? Like, everything you ever wanted, it's just from a more positive place. But my question now is, what is the most powerful mindset shift or exercise that you could recommend to someone who is struggling with their body image today? And how can they start to implement it in their lives?
I think what's most effective or powerful might vary from person to person. For me personally, the cognitive behavioral coaching approach really was very helpful to realize where these behaviors were coming from these underlying narratives and thought patterns, and doing the work of deprogramming those, which also included a lot of reading about like the history of diet culture and intentionally pursuing content and content creators that embodied the weight neutral approach. And that's including creators in large bodies. I don't agree with all of the messaging of the anti-diet space because sometimes it's not evidence-based. And that's really unfortunate because overall, they have a really fantastic message, but we also need to make sure that the science is sound. In the same way that people who are like 100% macros all the time, they're not a problem, that's not scientifically sound either. Like neither end of the spectrum is helpful. But to see that there are people in large bodies, there are people who are fat who are really happy with their lives. And I think we need to look at ourselves and wonder, why does that make me angry? Why does it bother me so much that this person in a large body is wearing a bathing suit? It literally doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. Why am I triggered by that? And that's when we start to unpack the fat phobia and the internalized weight stigma that we're directing to ourselves that says, if I hate that person in a swimsuit, I'm going to hate myself in a swimsuit. So how can we work on ourselves when we still have the capacity to judge others so harshly? So it's an overall, I think, internal movement toward acceptance, not just of ourselves, but of others. And that really comes from unpacking why we have such an issue with fat people. The next thing that I think is really helpful is the practice of diffusion. So that's when we are experiencing a really upsetting thought, like we're having a really crap body image moment or day, and we separate ourselves a little bit from that thought. We examine it. We say, okay, instead of like, oh, I'm so fat today, which is one sign of negative body image when we're saying fat instead of whatever negative emotion we're actually feeling. We have to be able to accurately identify the emotion. And then, like, why? Like, oh, okay, I'm feeling really insecure today. Why? Because I didn't do well on this work project yesterday. And so I woke up today feeling bad about myself. And it makes sense. I feel upset about that. My job is important to me. So the ability to step back and say, this is what I'm feeling and this is why, and to practice self-compassion, and then to do the thing that is going to lead us to be more aligned. It's going to lead us to feel better and more satisfied long term. To say, well, my one option is what I have been doing for years, which is to, start dieting again. But in the past, that really hasn't worked for me. Makes my life really small. Doesn't actually make me feel better about myself. What does actually make me feel better about myself? I don't know, volunteering, talking to a friend, journaling, practicing self-compassion. Like there are so many more options available to us when we open ourselves up to the idea that, hey, there are other ways to improve the way that I think and feel about myself. And I like how you said like vanity goals. Like, yeah, I could, I feel good when I get my hair cut. I got a nose job for full transparency because I had broken my nose when I was 18. And I already came from an Italian family. My nose was very crooked. It was something that I felt self-conscious about, but it's not something that was like affecting my whole quality of life. Like I didn't have exceptionally bad nose days. I was just like, it would be nice if I could go get my nose corrected and also breathe better. And so when I had the funds to do that, I went ahead and did it. And I like the way that my nose looks right now, but it didn't fundamentally change the way that I felt about myself as a person. And at that time, I still had really severe body image issues. I was still really trapped in macro tracking. So that one change only changed like one facet of what I thought about my appearance. Changing my appearance did not improve my overall body image. So, when we have these vanity goals, it's like, oh yeah, like temporarily, it's like, oh, that's cool. But we can't assume that means that we have transformed ourselves at the root. We have to be aware that it could just be that those thoughts are latent and we want to be prepared for our bodies changing or our circumstances changing. So we really, I think it's also a commitment to ourselves in that respect, that like, I don't want to just rely on my body. I actually do want to do the hard work.
I love the way that you ended that, and you kind of answered the last question that I was going to ask you as well, which is awesome because that's the very thing. It's like when you realize that there's all these other things that help you feel good, it's something that enhances the process. It's what happens in the background so that you can actually really see what you created. You can actually celebrate your wins, because you will never celebrate those wins or feel happy with those wins if you don't do all this background work like that has you truly feeling good within yourself, that has you truly feeling confident within yourself. Because confidence, like Gab has said throughout this whole podcast, is not about how you look in your body. It's about the actions that you take, what you do, and if it's aligned with your values. And your values are always changing. Everything is always changing. And you need to be able to evolve with that. And it just comes hand in hand, because like this is why I'm trying to show that when you come from a place of what actually empowers you, where can you find like strength isn't just about strength in the gym, because there's strength in other areas. There's character strength, there's mindset strength, there's so many things that can come under the umbrella of strength, that can come under the umbrella of feeling empowered. It's not just in the gym. Like when you feel like you're making the choices based on what you truly want, based versus what are they going to feel, what are they going to think about me if I make this choice, what are they going to think about me if I don't make this choice. It's kind of like when you go out to lunch and you want to order a chicken salad, but you're scared of being judged for picking the salad. It's like, no, but I really do want the chicken salad. I don't want any of those other heavier options because they never make me feel good. Then eat the freaking chicken salad without worrying about others think. But then if you want the chicken burger, have the chicken burger. It's about knowing exactly what it is you want and not worrying about what other people are going to think about your food choices. And then when you know that you are confident in those things, it's amazing how much can change. So with that, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the listeners with around even just their relationship with food and how these all things come together to bring them to a place where they can feel self-assured and not rely on other people's opinions to get to this place that makes them feel just at peace with themselves, because we all want that inner peace.
Yes. I love what you said, like that you have to take care, like order what you want without worrying about what other people are going to think. I would say, within reason of not harming anyone else. What you're going to do is not going to harm physically anyone else. Do the thing that you want to do and don't worry about what people are going to think about you, because they are not going to be with you at the end of the day or at the end of your life. You are the only person that's going to be with you every moment of every day until the end of your life. You are the person that you need to take care of. You need to take care of that person first. Like they say on the airplanes, apply your own oxygen mask first. Then you can show up for others. But if you are constantly putting others ahead of yourself and you're constantly neglecting your own needs and you're constantly abandoning yourself, you're going to feel tired. You're not going to have the energy or the mental capacity to do the things that are really important to you and that really help you feel good. And whether it's something with nutrition or exercise or just another hobby, you want to start reading a book, choose a thing that you really want to do that you've been putting off because you think that you owe other people all your time and energy, and start doing that every day. Even if you feel, okay, 10 minutes is all that I feel safe doing, then 10 minutes of reading every day, uninterrupted, completely sacred time. Set that boundary and allow your loved ones to support you, because that's a really beautiful thing that you're giving them in that moment when you say, hey, this is what I need from you. And they say, I've got your back. And if they don't say, I've got your back, then it's time to question whether that person is allowed so much access to your energy.
I love that. Access to your energy. That word right there, energy. You are the one who is in control of your energy, and you can influence it at any point in your life. Everything you do and everything you don't do influences that energy. I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. And this is probably the most profound thing you guys listening to this can do for yourself. Like, honestly, you are allowed to have whatever goals that you want to have. It's just, is it coming from a right place? And you don't know how good you can feel until you feel good. And it's really scary to take that first step because it's a whole mountain of the unknown. And the brain doesn't like the unknown. But once you start walking, you'll realize that this actually does feel good. This is actually uplifting my energy. And you start to experience life on a whole different level, and it's truly empowering. So, yeah, thank you. I'm going to put your link down below, but you did change your handle. So maybe you could let people know what your Instagram handle is and where they can find out more about fostering a better self-confidence. I want to say self-confidence.
Yeah. So yeah, my handle on Instagram is trust_and_nourish. And I have all of my resources in my link tree there. So that's the best place to find me. And I love when people send messages. So please feel free to reach out on Instagram for anyone who felt moved by the podcast.
Thank you so much for coming on. And if you guys got anything out of this, please message either one of us. Let us know if there's anything else that spurred some thought in your head or any triggers. Actually, I would love to know more than anything what triggers came up for you during this podcast, because I'm sure triggers are the main thing that would come up when hearing about body image, when hearing about things that aren't related to a scale or your clothes shrinking, because it's it's very different from the narrative we've been taught. So yeah, let either of one of us know, because then we can kind of marry the discomfort you feel. Thank you. And please rate this podcast a 5-star rating if you feel it's benefited you in any way, which I really try to do without any advertisements or promoting athletic greens. Sorry. But love you all. And I will talk to you on the next episode.